Welcome back to the Crash Course podcast. My name is Craig Crash Collins, joined as always by Brandon Scott, otherwise known as B. Scott. We talked a lot about Major League Baseball and how they're struggling to get back. Now there's a little bit of a wrench into things. I don't know if it's a major wrench, but definitely some concerns with the NBA now getting ready to come back. So we'll discuss that. We'll discuss Kyrie Irving and what he's been talking about as far as the league is concerned. And then we'll also, since Father's Day was this past weekend, we'll talk about some father-son duos in sports and get into that a little bit, some father-son memories as well. So a lot to get to on the podcast. We're trying to get with the Father's Day theme. Obviously, B. Scott is a father. I've got my father in the background here, as you can see. Good old Papa Collins, who when he was retiring from Ball State, they made a cardboard cutout of his head and put him like the final home game and put him in the nest, which was pretty cool. But B. Scott, how was your Father's Day, man?
It was pretty good. I got to spend part of Father's Day out at Lincoln Park Speedway out in Putnamville, Indiana, at the dirt track, watching some Indiana midget sprint cars out there, and old bombers, and having a good time running around in the dirt.
Sounds like it.
How was your weekend?
Oh, it was good. Just basically relaxed. Took in some Netflix, all that good stuff. Try to keep myself busy. Did some. Tried to distract myself from the mess that baseball is right now, because that's been a whole ongoing ordeal. But like I mentioned in the open, I mean, there's a lot going on with the NBA now as well, which I think players have until this week. I think it might be tomorrow to say yay or nay on whether or not they're going to go to Orlando. That was what I kind of, read into. But yeah, there are some player concerns over the Orlando bubble. There was an NBC article where Florida has reported 4,049 cases. That was back on Saturday, which was a new single-day record. They had previously set their new single-day record the previous day on Friday. Florida right now is becoming a hotspot for infections. They're one of the states that's been pretty gung-ho about reopening, so that's kind of makes sense. And then the NBPA made a statement saying the players are not traveling commercial. They do have a chance to quarantine, and their access from outside sources will be severely limited. So one of the concerns is that Disney employees are not under the same restrictions as NBA staff members, and that Adam Silver is currently monitoring the situation, but is undeterred. Now, one of the players who's been most vocal about not wanting the bubble has been Kyrie Irving. Of course, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago. He is not going to return to play, but that's not part of it. But that's just bringing it up that he isn't going to be participating, but he doesn't think that the Nets should participate. He says they should skip the Orlando bubble. It was also reported that he suggested the players should form their own league. That was later debunked, but that's interesting. But Kyrie and Avery Bradley have started a player coalition for anyone reluctant to speak out about the concerns over the bubble. And he also thinks that restarting the league will take away from the Black Lives Matter movement. So we'll get into that here in a little bit. But, my initial reaction from all of that is that basically, I mean, this is the thing that I think a lot of people, the general public, the general fan kind of forgets about what getting sports back means. We want to see the on the field. We want to see the on the court. We want to see these teams play. We want to see the season resume. We want to get a distraction from all the crap storm that has been the year 2020. But I don't think enough people look into the logistics. Like, I know personally, until I read that article, I didn't even think oh yeah, they're going to be playing at a resort where other people who aren't, under the same bubble, the same rules as them are going to be there as well. So there's also that risk that you're running. I know there's been some issues as far as where you with the families, how are you going to figure that whole situation out? So I think that's one of the big things that's kind of been overlooked in getting these sports back. Again, I think the NBA has been one of the best teams as far as, trying to get things figured out. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where, we kind of forget about the logistics side. We kind of all selfishly want just sports to come back, but there's a lot of things that aren't sports related because, we kind of we're, everything is in such a tough spot right now because no matter, and we're not going to get into the political side of things, but no matter how you look at it, this virus has come and kind of smacked us in the face, and we're put in a weird position both in sports and entertainment and in the regular world where you're like, well, we can't just sit here, but at the same time, it's dangerous. So it's kind of that, how do you balance, getting life back to sustainability while also making sure you take the most accurate precautions. And what this has kind of shown us is that the sports world isn't immune to that. Like there's other things that go into it, not just, we want to see our favorite players back on the court. Now, again, like I said, I think the NBA not only is, if there's a sport that's going to figure things out and a sport that can come back and be sustainable by coming back, it is the NBA, less players, that kind of thing. Also, I think Adam Silver is the best commissioner in professional sports right now, without a doubt. And he's been very adamant about like the testing side of it, which you haven't heard a lot from Major League Baseball, and it hasn't necessarily needed to be heard yet from the NFL, but you still haven't heard anything necessarily from the NFL yet. Like Adam Silver has been on top of it as far as being like, look, testing's not going to happen. If we can't get the testing thing figured out, then let's just pack it up and go home, which is kind of refreshing to see because he's like, hey, look, we understand that this is going on. So there's a league that can figure things out and find a way to get it done. It's the NBA, but there's definitely, I think it kind of, this whole story, while maybe doesn't jeopardize the possibility of the Orlando bubble, it definitely reminds, I think, us as a public, like, yeah, there's still a pandemic going on right now. We need to make sure that we're, taking care of that side of things first.
So for me, I look at this and I go, yeah, there's legitimate concerns about with the pandemic and everything and the bubble and how is that going to work with employees of the resort alongside NBA players and NBA employees, travel concerns, because, not everybody can afford a private jet to get down there. So how does that work out? I mean, obviously that's something that if you have a player on your team that can afford that, which every team does have at least one player that can afford that. I mean, renting a private jet, it's really not that hard, surprisingly. I mean, for me, yes, but for people making,
hey, let's pull our money, B. Scott. We can make that happen, right?
That's the thing. They can all pull their money together and they can all fly together. I mean, teams aren't that big. I mean, heck, they probably go on vacations with groups of people larger than their team and everything. So that's a legitimate concern there as well.
Well, and they wouldn't have to worry, I don't think, necessarily about the private jet anyway, just because of the fact that they all have like team planes as well. So
right. Well, those are commercial flights. Those are technically considered commercial.
So I guess they still have to go through like the airport stuff and all that kind of thing. So okay, that makes sense. All right, continue.
But for me, all that's legitimate. For me, where I kind of have a little bit of an issue, and I know this could be considered controversial and everything, but is the fact Kyrie's saying it could take away from the Black Lives Matter movement. For me, I argue against that because I feel like these guys will then have they'll be on a national stage and be able to have their voice heard on a major national stage by people that aren't on Twitter, that aren't on Instagram. And that could be a really loud voice. And the NBA has come out and said, hey, we're not going to penalize anybody for kneeling during the national anthem. Nothing's going to happen. If you kneel, fine. If you want to, whatever you want to do to make your voice be heard, that's fine. We're not going to penalize anybody for that. So this is a big opportunity for these guys to have their voice be heard. Right now, I mean, I'm part of an organization right now that's helping collegiate student athletes have their voice be heard in the social activism realm as far as digital activism goes. And, there's people that are beating down the doors to get their voices heard and have that ability to be on a stage to have their voice be heard. Whereas, I don't really think starting the league back up is going to take anything away from the movement. If anything, it's going to add a different dimension to the movement because it's going to add big names to a national stage to be heard and seen by people that aren't on Twitter. And right now, that's really only where the voice is for these NBA players, is on Twitter. And if you're trying to reach to people that need to hear the message, to be honest, the people that need to hear the message are not on Twitter. They're going to be watching the games on TV. So that's an opportunity for you to have your voice be heard. I don't think it's going to take anything away. If anything, it's going to show empowerment. It's going to,
Right.
So
yeah, I mean, I
just feel like Kyrie is just he's just trying to throw as many different things out there to get people to not want to be a part of, not be a part of it. And really, if you're going to build off of an argument of why not to play, the pandemic is the biggest argument of why not to play, because there's so many unknowns beyond that. But by pulling something else in, by pulling the Black Lives Matter movement in, to me, that feels like it's grasping for something, whereas the pandemic is a good argument to have, but the opportunity to have your voice be heard on a big national TV stage by your actions or whatever that may be, that is a bigger opportunity. I don't think it's going to take anything away from the current movement.
Yeah, I'm with you. I can see what Kyrie is saying, because I mean, if you look at it, even like especially in the sports world too, like this is the most unified I think we've ever seen, all facets of the world, like for this movement. I mean, you talk about the protests. Every major city has had a protest. You look at the fact that other countries are protesting. People who may have been, I don't really want to say on the fence, but like, you know what I mean? Like people who may not have been as big as far as having a voice before are now getting their voice out there. And so, and I don't think, and I mean, you look at what they did with the ESPYs. The ESPYs, they had a video at the beginning. NASCAR has been unafraid about possibly alienating their fan base, or parts of their fan base, to make sure they take a firm stance. So I mean, this, I can understand being like, this movement, it has probably the most traction it's ever had. Let's make sure we strike while the iron's hot and make sure nothing gets taken away from that. But at the same time, like you said, they're going to be on a big stage. They're going to still be able to, and that's the thing too. The league has come out and said, like you said, like they're going to still, allow players to have that platform of, the bubble. The bubble only applies to the pandemic. It doesn't apply for the information and the platform that you can get out there. And right. I mean, like right now, I've told people, today, I'm like, you know what? The NBA is the league I trust the most right now, just because of who they have like running it and who they have involved. So I think
Silver gets it. Adam Silver gets it.
Yeah.
And we're starting to see, the biggest thing I want to point to as an argument against Kyrie and saying it's going to take away from the movement is with NASCAR and Bubba Wallace. If NASCAR was not running right now on a weekly basis on national TV, being the sport that's on, I don't think Bubba Wallace's voice is going to be as powerful, because one, most NASCAR fans going into this would be like, who's Bubba Wallace? He doesn't run for one of the top teams, but because NASCAR is out there week after week after week on TV, they're actually running. It's giving Bubba Wallace the opportunity to have his voice heard on a big stage. And because of that, things have grown, things have changed. You've seen that firsthand, the change that's gone on within NASCAR. So having that stage available to you is worth taking advantage of. So by saying, us going out and playing and being unified and having our voices be heard, that's going to take away from the movement. I know I totally disagree. I think if you take this opportunity to really come together, have a clear, concise message, whatever it may be, this is an opportunity for the movement to really be heard by people that need to hear it, people that aren't on social media. And, the NBA culture gets it. Adam Silver gets it. This is the league that needs to step up and be there in the forefront of the movement, because they have the opportunity to really push for some change and for people to hear for that change.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, I agree 100% with that. Absolutely. So, I mean, I think, yeah, I don't think it'll take away from it. I think, they'll still, everybody's voices will get heard, like you said, the NBA gets it. Let's take a few minutes here, and I'm going to, discuss some stuff about Anchor. before we get into hot or cold. The Crash Course podcast is brought to you by Anchor. Looking to start a podcast but don't know where to start? Look no further than Anchor FM. Anchor allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your computer or mobile device, and will distribute it to other sites such as Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify on a budget. Not only is Anchor completely free of charge, but will also allow you to make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Anchor, it's everything you need in a podcast in one place. Also, just as a reminder, you can follow us at Craig Crash or at Crash Course FM on Twitter, Crash Course Podcast on Facebook, and you can hear us every Tuesday wherever podcasts can be heard: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. Also, check out our YouTube channel, Crash Course Podcast. So,
if you're checking out the YouTube page, my side of things over here is brought to you by Moe's Tavern, home of Duff beer. Drink Duff. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was like, I like the mixing it up. You've been in that crazy man cave for the last couple of weeks, so I'm glad you decided to switch it up a little bit.
Hey, I had to go on site somewhere. The pandemic's starting to kind of wind down here for me, and I had to get out and go get a drink somewhere other than my own living room.
Well, I mean, it looks like there's not too many people in there. It looks like you're social distancing, so I think you're good to go.
Yeah, I rented the place out for the night.
Well, I mean, so you'd say you don't have private jet money, but yet you're renting out bars. I mean, this is classy. I mean,
we are talking about Moe's Tavern.
True. Let's get into hot or cold here. I have a couple of questions this week. Question number one: NBA fans should be concerned about the resumption of the 2019-20 season. I think that is a hot take. Just to be concerned. Like, there are some valid concerns if enough players end up opting out of going down there, or, kind of, like I said, they have, I think, until sometime this week, I think it's tomorrow, to decide to say yay or nay on if they're going down there. But, I mean, it's definitely some cause of concern because of the uptick in cases, because, Florida's kind of been a hotbed for the coronavirus. And obviously, I think that's another thing that I think the general public overlooks as well, is the fact that really, I mean, these players are in the prime. Most of these players, or some of these players, are in the prime of their career, and this is risking their health and all that stuff to go down there and play as well. So obviously, if you're in the hotbed of coronavirus, then that obviously can be a scary thing too. So I think there's definitely some concerns. Do I think there's going to be enough concern to where the resumption of the 2019-20 season, doesn't happen? I don't think so. I think we're definitely going to resume play. But I think another part of that too, it comes in our next question of whether or not it will conclude, because that's also something to be concerned about as well.
So for me, I think this is a hot take. I think this is more than just a hot take for the NBA. I think this is a hot take for, honestly, my gut feeling is all of sports for the foreseeable future. Mostly because, I mean, so far we've seen a few NBA players drop out. I don't think that's a concern at this point, because so far the biggest name is Trevor Ariza, and he's not dropping out because of the pandemic or anything. He's dropping out because he already agreed to a 1-month visitation with his son, and he'd rather spend that month with his son than in a bubble. So that makes sense. You do what you got to do. You do you. This is supposed to be your off season right now, so go ahead, go do your off season. But for me, you're starting to see, even with college sports, you're starting to see athletes coming back to campus and doing the voluntary workouts with their teams and everything. And all of a sudden now we're starting to see a spike in coronavirus cases amongst college athletes. I mean, Clemson alone this past week had 25 confirmed cases just on their football team alone. LSU's been hit by it. I forget which school it was, but across their entire athletic department, they had 91 confirmed cases of the coronavirus. So I have a feeling especially now as we're starting to see spikes in the numbers again across major states, especially the South, where it wasn't really hit as hard previously. But so we're starting to see spikes in these cases now with people going back and working out with their teams. That is a huge red flag for me. And now I don't have any insider information, anything like that. This is all just my gut feeling. My gut feeling originally was we're going to see sports again. This is going to happen. You know, it may not be with fans for a while, but we're going to see sports again. But as time has gone on and I'm starting to see more and more reports coming out, my gut is just telling me it's not looking good.
No.
And I'm afraid all it takes is will the NBA resume? I think it will. But all it takes is a few of the players to come down with it, like even just 2 players within the bubble to come down with it, and they're shutting that thing down. I mean, there's already university presidents that have said if a large group of numbers of players start coming down with the COVID, guess what? It's done. We're shutting it down until we can figure out another plan. I have a feeling that's just the way it's going to be here for a while. There's already some schools. Now, this is a Division III school came out yesterday and tweeted that they are actually shutting down all fall and winter sports. I mean, it's only Division III, but still, fall and winter sports are done, and they're going to reevaluate it for the spring. A step-up league, the Patriot League, has come out and said, hey, we got some restrictions. We're not going to do any air travel for our teams. Games have to be played within these specific dates, and there's not going to be any overnight stays. So there's a lot of restrictions out there. I think people are starting to set the stage up to cancel it if need be. And my gut is it's leaning more and more towards, I don't know. And then you have this Dr. Anthony Fauci coming out and saying, I don't see how it's possible for football to be played this fall in the midst of a potential second wave. It just doesn't seem safe. And I mean, just because one doctor, the main doctor, came out and said it doesn't necessarily mean that's going to hold any clout, because all these different leagues have their own medical staffs and their own experts on it that are looking into everything and helping make decisions. But my gut is just telling me it's not looking too good, especially with the spikes in some of these numbers that we're seeing in certain states. And it's really pushing me to the point of going, I don't know. I really don't know. So I think this is definitely a hot take, not just for the NBA, but mostly for all sports. I still think the NBA starts back up regardless. But like you said, in the next question, this kind of leads more into that.
Yeah, I mean, it makes you wonder. I will say this. If it doesn't work out with the NBA, because, I mean, the Major League Baseball should theoretically, I say theoretically, I'm very skeptical now on the whole baseball thing. But even if baseball starts back up, the NBA has been the most well thought out situation. Like I said, we've heard nothing from the NFL, which at this point, the NFL may just be like, look, we'll see if, how the first couple of weeks of the NBA thing goes, and then we'll kind of make our decision there. I mean, I think if the NBA thing falls through, I mean, I think that's going to be a major blow. Like, that's when I'll truly be, because, like, football, I feel like, has had plenty of time, and because the NFL is kind of super secretive, you don't really know what's been going on behind the scenes to know, like, if they have a plan in place. They haven't really needed to have one, so why let their plan get out there? And, the NFL's, I mean, I don't want to, speculate here, but, I mean, their kind of gamesmanship as far as, like, kind of having everything behind the curtain and letting everything else play out before they show their hand. You never, like, so we don't know what's going on with the NFL, what plan they have in place, or at least I haven't heard anything. So, but I would venture to say that if the NBA doesn't conclude their season this year, then that's a gigantic blow to anything else starting. Because even then, like, another thought that I don't think a lot of people have had either, at least people like, you and me, who sometimes, can get, media credentials and stuff like that. Like, they're not going to, like, what do you do about people like in the press box, that cover these college teams and these high school teams? What are you going to do about them? You can't really social distance in a press box. So, and so are they going to play college, and high school sports with no fans and all? It gets really super deep. But I would say, as far as professional sports go, if the NBA, I mean, the NBA will resume their season. I think it's a hot take to be concerned, but I'm confident they will resume. But that kind of leads into the next question, which is the 2019-20 NBA season will conclude. And I originally put a hot take, but I'm going to switch that to, well, I'm going to go with a hot take for now. I mean, it seems good for now. But, I mean, I would say if it doesn't conclude, then that's a huge blow to all sports. Because, I mean, this is at the professional level. This is their livelihood. I mean, high school kids, theoretically.
Can I step in? Can I step in?
Yeah. Go ahead.
I don't think it would be a huge blow to all sports. It's going to be a huge blow to all sports that cannot social distance.
Okay,
sports like NASCAR, IndyCar, golf,
yeah.
They're going to be fine. But, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, for sure. And, I mean, even –
they will be okay.
Even, like, to an extent, like golf. Like, you can still play golf. You can still theoretically play tennis. Like, there's other sports that can still, go back. But yeah, it does raise that question. But, yeah, I think as of right now, I don't have, like, a bad, like, pit in my stomach, although the more we've talked about it, it's kind of swayed me to go the other direction. I will say for right now, I would say it's a hot take that it will conclude. But I will definitely say this. I would be not surprised in the slightest as more teams, because obviously there's 22, there's only 16 teams that can make the playoffs. As teams get eliminated from playoff contention, I mean, obviously I think they're going to be, and I don't know that they wouldn't be anyway, but I think you're going to see teams, heck, if you see, like we talked about with the Wizards, I can see them shutting the whole thing down if they don't gain a couple of ground on, a little bit of ground on Orlando. I could see the Spurs, who are pretty far out right now, if they, go back to playing and lose 4 games in a row, they might shut. I can see teams shutting it down within that first week if they're not gaining any ground, if they're not, getting back into the playoff hunt, because, yeah, it's definitely going to be a major concern. And I don't think the NBA will shy away from that, knowing that, hey, the less teams and players and families we have to worry about, the more logistically it will, capable we'll be of finishing the season.
Right. So I definitely think, will the NBA season conclude? I think this is a cold take, to be honest. I think all it takes is 1 or 2, maybe not just 1, maybe, 2, at least 2 players to contract COVID-19, and you're going to start seeing everybody back out, and the NBA is going to have to shut it down because the bubble didn't work. The bubble burst, essentially. So I went into it in the last question, but I think this is a cold take. I honestly, I don't think I don't have a good feeling about the NBA being able to conclude their season. I think they'll start it back up. They'll have a good run there for a little bit, and then something is going to happen. Somebody's going to catch something, and boom, it's done. Players will say, we're not going out. Okay, it's pretty much kind of like the way it will shut down the way it shut down originally. Players will go, whoa, no, we're not going out there. Not happening.
Yeah, and that's completely fair. Next question, the Orlando bubble will take away from the Black Lives Matter movement. We kind of already covered this, before, but that's obviously, in my opinion, a cold take. I think, like I said before, I agree with Kyrie's concerns. Like, I understand why he would be concerned. Even Damian Lillard came out and said, like, yeah, it's a legitimate concern. But I think that the NBA will still offer the players, they're not going to take away from their platform, and they're going to actually encourage, there might be, heck, I mean, you got to know there's going to be a lot of, there's got to be a lot of, players that'll come out with, Black Lives Matter movement, T-shirts when they go out to warm up, that there's going to be, there's a chance there's going to be some sort of, video presentation before the game. There's going to be definite, and that's just from the actual game aspect of it. Like you said, they're going to have a lot of eyes on them already. There's a lot of ways that they can still keep it going. So I think it's a cool take.
Yeah, I'm not even going to get more into it. I was already on my soapbox. It's a cold take for me as well.
All right. So final question. It's a little bit fun one. And then we have some breaking news, Scott. Do you think the players could ever create their own league? Of course, like we said, Kyrie brought it up. or was supposedly brought it up, and then it was like basically refuted. But could the players start their own league? I'm going to go with hot take on this, and hear me out. If there is a league that could do it, it's the NBA, who is already very much a player-centric league. They're all about the players. The NBA or the NFL and the NHL, I think those are the most stable leagues right now. Major League Baseball, I think as much as I'd like to see them get away, make their own league and kind of get away from all the mess that the owners, are kind of, creating by most of them, it seems like don't even want baseball to come back. But whatever. But anyway, as much as, the players might want to get out from under the current league right now, I don't think, they'd be able to do it. If there is a league that could do it, it's the NBA. There is 100% a possibility. Now, granted, there's not going to be the money there initially, which you would need to, play the high-level players you need to take away from the NBA. And plus, the NBA, I think, has it good right now with who they've got in charge of it and that kind of thing. We talked good things about them before. I think if there is a league that could do it, it's the NBA. Now, like I said, I think Major League Baseball would like to. I think it'd be interesting to see if, since, some of these minor league teams are now going to be, not affiliated with Major League and on the risk of shutting down, there's maybe a possibility, I don't know, that you could, still keep up a league that way. I don't know. That's super far-fetched. But if there's a league that can make it happen, it's the NBA.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is a hot take. I mean, anybody can do anything. I mean, heck, didn't LeVar Ball want to create his own league, the Big Baller Brand League or something? I mean, to try to compete against the – I mean, heck, even Vince McMahon tried to create a football league to go up against the NFL. He tried it twice, a matter of fact. I mean, anybody can try anything, but like you said, the NBA is probably one of the only leagues right now that is player-centric, player-oriented. The players have it good. They have it good in the NBA. They have somebody in charge that gets it. And I don't know why they would want to leave other than, Kyrie thinking they're being forced to play in Orlando when nobody has said that.
Yeah, it's funny, too, because when you originally sent me that article that said he wanted to create his own league, I was like, isn't this the same guy that thought the earth was flat? And then I was like, well, wait, if the NBA, if there was any team, if there's any league that could do it, it would be the NBA. But because the NBA is so player-centric, which makes them the most likely candidates to do it, why would they do it? Because like you said, they have it easy. So there would be no reason to do it.
I guess anybody can do it. Anybody can try to do it, but it just doesn't make sense. Yeah. I mean, we've seen these things come and go. I mean, look, wasn't it the Big Three?
Yeah.
League that it had some legs to it, but ultimately flop. I mean, I don't know. No, anybody can do anything they want, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be successful or will happen. So this is a hot take because, they can do it. Anybody can do it.
Anybody
can try.
In the words of Kevin Garnett, anything is possible. Right. All right. So now I said I had some breaking news. We try to give off the illusion that we don't pre-record this the night before we release it, but we're gonna peel back the curtain. So there's only been a few times. If anyone's out there tracking when we peel back the curtain, this is another one of those times. But I just ran across the notification on my phone. The MLB owners vote to implement 2020 season after players reject restart proposal. They released a statement saying, it's going to take me to Twitter now. Give me a second. Please hold. Major League Baseball released the following statement tonight. They said today the Major League Baseball Players Association informed us they have rejected the agreement framework developed by Commissioner Manfred and Tony Clark. Needless to say, we are disappointed by this development. The framework provided an opportunity for MLB and its players to work together to confront the difficulties and challenges presented by the pandemic. It gave our fans a chance to see an exciting new postseason format and offered players significant benefits, including universal DH for 2 years, a guaranteed $25 million in playoff pools in 2020, $33 million in forgiven salary advances, that would increase the take-home pay of 61% of major league players. Overall earnings for players of 100. Overall earnings for players of 104% of prorated salary. And over the last 2 days, MLB agreed to remove expanded postseason in 2021 in order to address player concerns. In the view of this rejection, the MLB clubs have unanimously voted to proceed with the 2020 season under the terms of the March 26 agreement. The provisions listed above will not be operative. In order to produce a schedule within a specific number of games, we're asking the Players Association provide us by 5 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow with two pieces of information. The first is whether the players will be able to report to camp within 7 days by July 1st. The second is whether the Players Association will agree on the operating manual, which contains the health and safety protocols necessary to give us the best opportunity to conduct and complete our regular season and postseason. So the owners, basically, Rob Manfred, as we've discussed before, has basically an emergency red button. He can impose a season if he wants to. And they've agreed as owners to implement a 60-game schedule. And basically what they're asking the players to do, hey, if you can report by July 1st, you're going to have to waive your potential to, because they can file a grievance, against the league, for saying that okay, for basically, I don't know exactly what you can get into on the grievance, but there's a grievance they can do that's basically says hey, if you said 60 games, we could have done this a long time ago. We could have had this settled a long time ago. So, with basically they can file a grievance if there was time to do more than 60 games, but they didn't do it. You could argue that the MLB owners operated in bad faith. Anyway, I'm kind of rambling here, but hey, Major League Baseball, I don't know. I'm not super confident this is going to play out, but right now MLB is supposedly back.
Yeah, that statement was posturing for sure. Posturing in the favor of the owners. Look what we offered, and they turned it down.
Oh,
that
for
was
sure.
A lot of talking about more money for the players. That's a posturing statement if I've ever heard one. But
yeah, I mean, because this was to combat last week when the players basically all went out and said #win and wear. Because that's what they told the owners, hey, we're sick of negotiating. They said win and wear. Then they proposed another, the MLB presented a proposal and they said, actually, no, not win and wear. We still want to figure this out, which again, I'm still on the player's side. I still think that, what people get lost in is the fact that, we got into it a lot last week, but people get lost in the fact that oh, well, it's it's millionaires versus billionaires. Well, the billionaires are the ones that took the risks, not the players. Your employer is the one that takes the risk of owning the business. They can't punish you that the business might be failing. I mean, obviously, the business fails, you're technically punished, but I mean, it's just I'm not super confident this will play out, but yeah, they definitely set themselves up to be look, we said when and where, which was July 1st. Now it's the ball's in your court, so we'll see how this plays out, but. Yeah, late breaking news on the Crash Course podcast, which I guess theoretically once this releases it won't be breaking news, but it was breaking news when we recorded, B. Scott.
Right. And if anybody thinks we do this live,
I'd hate to break that illusion to you.
Yeah, but you're also probably one of those people that's watching a sitcom and go, man, that is a great live show.
The people that go up to Jenna Fisher and ask if what's going on with her and and Jim Halpert. Why can't I think of his name right now? John Krasinski. Yeah, those are the same people. Those are the same people that ask Rainn Wilson if he's dating Angela Kinsey. Yeah, but so some news there. Let's wrap up the podcast today with some Father's Day stuff. Talk about fathers and sons in sports, and we got some questions here as well. So. The best father-son duo in sports. Now, B. Scott, there's been a lot of great father-son duos in sports. We talked about it at the beginning or before we started recording. Now, there's a lot of them in the racing world, which is pretty cool. You've got Dale Jr., Dale Sr., you've got Ned Jarrett, Dale Jarrett, you've got the Unsers, you've got the Andrettis. There's a lot of, family camaraderie in the racing world. And so I was trying to think, and I was like, it's between two for me. There's a lot of good ones out there, and that's why we're going to get to the most underrated father-son duo here in a second. But when I look at it, I think what's cool is that there's two of them that really stand out. There's obviously, with us being from Indiana, obviously the Mannings are the first to come to mind. That not only do you have Archie Manning, who was good, but then you had Peyton and Eli, who played. You have two combinations that, yes, if Archie and Eli isn't as good of a combination as Archie and Peyton, but they're still ones that can stand by themselves. I mean, both Eli and Peyton won 2 Super Bowls, all that kind of stuff.
Eli and Peyton are a better duo than Archie and Peyton.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, so that's pretty cool that you have, not one, but two. Like, if you're Archie Manning, you're like, yeah, maybe, I was on the Saints, when they were terrible, but, both my sons have been amazing. But when I look at it, the reason why I'm picking King Griffey Sr. and King Griffey Jr. is that, yes, King Griffey Sr. was not in his prime, but you talk about, you have, when you talk about best father-son duos, I was trying to look at, like, who's made, like, the most impact on the game. And, like, yeah, Archie was great. Eli's won 2 Super Bowls. He's going to be known for as kind of the Patriots killer, for his career, and Peyton's broken a heck of a lot of records. He, built Lucas Oil Stadium basically, not by himself, but like by his stats. And so, that's all great. But I think what's crazy about, you talk about influential players, like, in their times. I mean, you have King Griffey Sr., who was on, the Big Red Machine. He was a big factor in those Reds teams. Then he goes on to the Mariners, who, oh, by the way, get King Griffey Jr. So you not only have a father-son duo, that's kind of what separates it for me. You have a father-son duo on the same team, and a team that ends up being pretty darn good in the Seattle Mariners. So that's why I think puts them a little bit over the edge for me. And we talked about last week, reasons why the MLB kind of bounced back after the strike. I mean, King Griffey Jr. is another one that, where he, his rise to prominence and him, getting drafted and being, part of that great 1995 Mariners team is another great story from the immediate post strikeout, baseball world. So that's why I'm going with the Griffeys over the Mannings. I think they're interchangeable. But when you're looking at, who's a father-son duo that's not only super prominent, but also were able to play at the same time, or also, productive at the same time, while also being, pretty big in their respective generations. I mean, the Griffeys are pretty good in that respect. Yes, they only combined a couple of championships. They don't have as many titles as the Mannings, but I've never been one for the titles argument. I think it's a whole body of work thing anyway. So Griffeys for me, bar none.
Okay, so the number one in my mind, it's kind of off the beaten path a little bit, father-son duo is Bobby and Brett Hall. Bobby Hall was one of the greatest hockey players to ever step onto the ice. Now, he's a Hall of Famer. He was elected to the NHL All-Star First Team 10 times, won the Art Ross Trophy 3 times, and won the Hart Trophy twice. And then, of course, his son, who I grew up kind of watching, Brett Hall. He was just a scoring machine. He currently is ranked 3rd in goals in NHL history and is tied with Wayne Gretzky. So, I mean, that's a pretty intense duo. I mean, I never watched Bobby Hall play, obviously, but I watched Brett Hall play. And, I mean, both of them are NHL Hall of Famers. And actually, they were the first father-son duo in NHL history to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. So that's pretty cool. And, it's kind of one that with hockey, you don't really think too much about it. But, I mean, you look at the accolades that these two put together throughout their careers, and it's just really impressive. I mean, obviously, Brett Hall came up through a time where, there was Wayne Gretzky and everything. So you don't hear too much about Brett Hall, but he was just one of those players. I mean, he had a great career. And so, yeah, I'm going to say them just because I like being different. I guess if I had to pick a second one, let's talk about really off the beaten path. Not many people may know this one, but Man o' War and War Admiral. These are two horses. Man o' War is War Admiral's father. War Admiral completed the Triple Crown in 1937. And Man o' War, I mean, obviously, if anybody, you even just watched a Kentucky Derby, the name Man o' War comes up. I mean, he's considered one of the best thoroughbred racing horses ever. So, yeah, kind of fun ones.
I think as far as going for horse racing, I just have to say, nay. Nailed it.
Uh-huh.
See, gotta get the dad
on Father's Day, having a good dad joke.
Exactly. Okay, moving on to the most underrated father-son duo, and you're gonna notice a little bit of a theme with mine, because we're talking about father-sons that, you know, kind of overlap, are kind of in the same, generation. Well, not really same generation, but same, like, are relevant at kind of the same time. And that is going to be Howie and Chris Long. Now, you look at Howie Long, who played with the Raiders, had a lot of success with the Oakland Raiders. I was looking at, the other choices you could possibly go with. I think you could plug any of the racing ones into this scenario, not because, either of them are on a different tier, but just because those sports haven't been as popular, at least not recently. So I think if you were to look at most, underrated now, I don't think a lot of people, or most popular now, I don't think you see a lot of racing ones. I think the one you could go with probably the most that could be up with that, like Archie, Ken Griffey, whole category would be Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Sr. But I think, in that tier list, I mean, there was a couple other ones that were baseball. I mean, there was, Barry and Bobby Bonds. I was like, okay, well, yes, but, Barry is just so much better than, which I'm noticing a trend as well. I mean, you look at it and it kind of goes to what we've talked about before with like how sports are different now than they were, a couple of generations ago, is the fact that, like, you look at a lot of these combinations and the sons have oftentimes been better than the fathers. I think it's from the fact that, like, everything's more specialized now. Everybody's been, kind of groomed to be, the athlete in their respective sport now. But yeah, I was looking into it. I saw, I mean, the Matthews are another family that's got a lot of people in the NFL, but I was looking at it, I was like, Howie Long not only had a successful, NFL career with the Oakland Raiders, won some Super Bowls, but obviously, he's also been a staple on the Fox broadcast, for the NFL broadcast. So that kind of, makes him still relevant even today. And then Chris Long has won, a couple of Super Bowls, won a Super Bowl with the Patriots, won a Super Bowl with the Philadelphia Eagles. He has been just a force. You also have Kyle Long, who's he's kind of been a little bit on the back burner because he's an offensive lineman, and even that difference between Chris and Howie being defensive line and Kyle being offensive line, there's, I think, still even more popularity and fame that can go with being on the defensive line. So definitely, I think Howie Long and Chris Long are a good combination that you can go with there, just because they've won the rings and they're still relevant even today. So I'm going with those two.
I look at the racing world, there's a lot. Part of me wants to go with Dale Earnhardt Sr. and Dale Earnhardt Jr. because I was looking at different lists that were naming some of the best father-son duos, and they weren't on majority of they were barely on any of the lists, which is, I guess it has mostly to do with the fact that Dale Earnhardt Jr. never won a championship, but I'm seeing other names on these lists, and it's like, well, neither did some other people. But the one that I'm going with, just because this is Indy. Let's go with the Unsers, Al Senior and Little Al. I mean, Al Unser Senior won 4 Indy 500s. He won 4 Indy 500s. That's impressive. Not many drivers have done that, and we're seeing how hard it is to continue or to achieve that. I mean, look how many times Elio Castroneves has tried and is still trying to get that elusive 4th Indy 500. So to have won it 4 times, and to think about when he won it 4 times, that was amongst some great names then as well. So that's awesome. And then Little Al, Little Al was voted into the Motorsports Hall of Fame. And he only won 2 races in IndyCar. And I guess what hurts Little Al is the fact that he's probably visited Moe's Tavern one too many times.
Yeah.
But
true.
it's a name that is synonymous with the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And whether that is Al Senior or Little Al, either one, that's a name. I mean, that's a big name. I mean, they have a name on a suite. When you're walking around the garages, there's a hospitality room named after the Unsers. I mean, it's Al Senior, but still, I mean, it's just a name that's, I mean, you see them walking around IMS and you kind of look at them in awe because it's the Unsers. It's, I think, pretty similar to probably the Earnhardts, but obviously very similar. Probably less so than the Earnhardts. But for me, if we're talking underrated, I'm talking about the Unsers, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good one for sure. Final question on the father-son train of thought here, and then we'll wrap up the podcast this week. Father-son moment. What's a favorite father-son moment that you have in the world of sports? For me, I've got two. So I've got one on the racing side of things, one on the non-racing side of things. So one that's racing related is obviously when I was younger, I was a big NASCAR fan, big Jeff Gordon fan. I was 7. It was the 1998 Brickyard 400. It was the first race I'd ever been taken to. My dad and I ended up going to Chicagoland once. We went to Kansas once. We've gone to a few races together. But this was the first one. And it was funny because, my dad and I have talked about it since. Like, he thought that I was, he went into this experience a little bit skeptical because he thought, like, oh, he's going to be, he's either going to be bored. He's going to think it's too loud. He's going to, he's going to have to go to the bathroom a bunch of times. Like, he was worried about, what experience I was going to have. And I was absolutely glued to that thing for all 160 laps. And Jeff Gordon won, which was awesome as well. So that's a cool memory. The one that probably supersedes that only a little bit was, because my dad's worked for Ball State, because I've lived in, Muncie my whole life, or most of my life. I'm a big Ball State football fan. I've been around the Ball State program my entire life. And there's one instance, I can't remember when it was. I want to say 2003, but that may be actually too recent. I'm not sure. I think it's 2003, though. I'd have to look it up. But Ball State, despite what you may have heard after 2008, has not been a, football powerhouse. They had some good years, in the late 2000s, early 2010s, but for the most part, they've been a dumpster fire. They were lucky to get maybe 1 or 2 wins there for a while. And so they're usually kind of your run-of-the-mill MAC team. And so they're going up against Toledo, who, by the way, for those of you who didn't know, had Chester Taylor at the time, who went on to play for the Chicago Bears. They had just beaten Minnesota, who I think had Marion Barber, I think, still at the time. And they had just gone to Minnesota in the Metrodome and beaten the Golden Gophers. The Toledo Rockets came into that game ranked, and they took the lead with it was less than a touchdown lead, like late in the game. I think it was like maybe, waning seconds of the game, they took the lead to go up, and you're like, okay, Cardinals fought hard, but, shocker, we lost. But, it was a good game. It was entertaining at least. And Corey Parchman takes the ensuing kickoff all the way back for a touchdown. The entire team runs out, piles on him. They tore down the goalposts. Ball State went nuts. And I remember going nuts myself because, again, you think, years of Ball State being mediocre, you're like, okay, they lost Toledo. We knew they were probably going to lose going into it, so it's fine. At least it was a good game. And then that absolutely, you went ballistic. This is a team that was ranked. They're probably ranked like 21st or something. It wasn't a super high rating, but still, it's a ranked win. A ranked win is a ranked win. And Corey Parchman returns the kickoff all the way back, scores, Ball State wins. And I don't think they did much after that, but the rest of the season. But it was a pretty cool memory. It's one that I definitely will never forget, being a diehard Ball State fan. And I know you don't hear those words put together too often, but being a diehard Ball State fan, that's one that will always stick out for me.
Hey, if anybody that's a Ball State football fan, I highly encourage you right now to go check out the Ball State Athletics Facebook page, because they've been putting out a video series where Joel Gadet, the voice of the Cardinals right now, and several alumni football players from Craig and I's era at Ball State are watching film and breaking down big wins in Ball State football during that time frame. So they recently did one with the road trip where Ball State beat Virginia. And then they also I shared this one onto our Facebook page.
That's
the
nice.
one of Ball State defeating University of Southern Florida, the USF Bulls, at home a year after absolutely getting just
decimated.
I mean, so I was trying to remember. I was like, I know you and I were on the field that day, but it was not we were not doing Cardinal College game day at that time. The year before was Cardinal College game day, the year that they went down to USF and lost. This was post Cardinal College game day years for at least, well, technically for both of us at that point in time.
I'm pretty sure I was still, because I remember being in the press box.
You may have still been CCG. I wasn't at the time. I was there with SportsLink.
Yeah, okay, that's probably what it was. You were probably down there for SportsLink. I was probably down there for Cardinal.
Because you were trying to get away from.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
This was probably Craig's one of his last. Oh yeah, because it wasn't. That's right, because it was later on when coverage came into play and Craig got the boot.
Yep. You know what I'm talking about. Anyway.
I know exactly what you're talking about, and it has to do with somebody down in Terre Haute.
Yeah.
Not naming names or anything.
We're over it.
Yeah, way over it. So, moving on. Luke Martin, moving on.
Oh, God.
Moving on. So, funny thing is, my first race was with my dad as well, and it was in 2001. It was the 2001 Brickyard, and Jeff Gordon just so happened to win that race too. But for me, my two, one of them kind of, it's a partial good memory. It was October of 2004, late October, mid-October possibly. My dad and I were up at Purdue, a football game up at Purdue. Go figure. And we got up there that day bright and early, and it was freezing cold on this day. I mean, it was horrible. It was so cold. The wind was blowing from every direction. And if you're ever on the Purdue campus, you know that's actually possible. It blows from every direction up there. But this day, it was totally worth it. College game day, ESPN College game day was on campus for the first and only time. We were there, and obviously we didn't get in too close, but we found ourselves a good spot up on a hill overlooking Rankin track and field. And so that was pretty cool to see that. However, the good memories of that ended probably there, because later on that night, after we, got our way into the game after trying to get scammed by a couple 70-year-old women that were looking to unload their tickets for like $100 a piece because they just wanted to go shopping. The infamous face mask fumble happened, and Purdue still has yet to recover from that.
Program has been in disarray ever since.
I wouldn't say it's been in disarray, but there was a time there where it was in disarray. But yeah, but the other memory was probably in the racing realm, one of two. First one was my dad and I went to a Brickyard where it was a big debacle, that race, with tires. Basically, they were pitting almost every 20 laps. Mm-hmm. But we were sitting in the
Brickyard that I've ever been to.
We were sitting in the old wheelchair seats at the time on the front straightaway, which are right on the front row. And we left the race that day covered in rubber because we were so close to the track down there. But, we were right along pit road and everything. But what was cool, though, is Jimmy Johnson won that race. And where we were sitting, he basically stopped right in front of us, dropped the window net, pointed at me, and did his burnout right then and there. So that was pretty cool. But the other big cool one, a big great racing memory with him was probably when we got to sit in the new wheelchair seats up on the start finish line, up in the upper balcony at IMS for the 100th running of the Indy 500. That was a pretty cool experience to break in those seats for the first time. And I was dumb enough that I let those tickets go to the wayside. So I don't have those seats anymore, unfortunately.
Hey, yeah, some good memories though, for sure. I knew you were there at that Jimmy Johnson race, but I didn't know you played actually. That's pretty cool. Yeah, that's awesome. But yeah, I remember that race too, and that's actually the last Brickyard I've ever been to, and it's funny because it almost seems like that's kind of what led to stage racing. I don't want to say that's what directly caused it because it was a few years later that they went to it, but that's basically what it was. It was today's format back in 2013 or 12 or whatever it was.
Yeah, I forget which year it was. Or, there's also the story of when my dad and I were at the 2001 U.S. Grand Prix down on pit road, and they were out getting ready for their practice laps before the race, and the pole sitter and also reigning champ, I think, or somebody that was up there in the points, Mika Hakkinen, he pulled up. We're standing there at the start, at this in where pit road exit is. He pulls up, and you can tell he looks over at us, and he tries to show off and burned rubber and sped out of the pits real quick. Unfortunately, the pit road was closed, so nobody was allowed to leave pit road. So he had to forfeit his pole position and had to start at the rear of the field.
Oh my God.
Michael Schumacher went on to win that race.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Because pole position is key because they don't pass in Formula One. So
no.
Yeah. So it's key to be number one. But yeah, some good memories. I thought it'd be cool to go back through the the memory bank there and do some Father's Day stuff. So yeah, great stuff. Always fun to go over that. Well, that will do it for this week's edition of the Crash Course Podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter at Crash Course FM. Like us on Facebook, Crash Course Podcast. Go follow us on YouTube, Crash Course Podcast on YouTube. We do the live stream on Facebook, and then the podcast releases on Anchor and on YouTube after that. And then, you can hear us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, basically wherever podcasts can be heard. We will be back next week, but until then, have a good week, everybody.